Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I'm bringing you another Dragon Ball Z segment, doing my, I guess you can say, my second official rant of Dragon Ball Z. Now, this idea kind of came in a kind of a weird context because I was editing a video. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but I'm actually editing a video to release later on this week, and Dragon Ball Nation gave me a call on Skype, and he was talking about some of the worst Dragon Ball Z games he's ever played. And let's just say that we both agree, without a doubt, on what is the worst Dragon Ball Z game of all time. Now, we actually narrowed it down to two. We narrowed it down to two games between Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu, and we narrowed it down to Dragon Ball Z Sagas. But because Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu was limited anyways by being on the Game Boy Advance, we give that a little bit of a pass, as Sagas, for a bigger platform game that was released for the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox, it, in my opinion, and by the way guys, we're going to say right now, he doesn't mind if I refer to him as Josh. Me and Josh are going to use heavy profanity in this video today, so if you are younger and you want to tune off, please do so now, because you are going to hear some very foul language. So let's get this party started, Josh. So Dragon Ball Z Sagas is the worst fucking Dragon Ball Z game I've ever played in my life. I think it's one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. I'd really have to think as what games really measured up to being as bad. It's the biggest piece of shit that I ever thought could ever become a Dragon Ball Z game, and I think that it's the Dragon Ball Z game that only sold copies because it has the name of arguably the biggest anime of all time. So that just starts off my all-around opinion. But Josh, what do you have to say about Sagas from your recollection?
It's definitely one of the worst Dragon Ball Z games of all time. I think Taiketsu still is worse, even though it's on the Game Boy. But as far as being the worst game I've ever played, there are still others that are worse, believe it or not. But as far as Sagas, I mean, that piece of shit game. That game was so busted. And, I mean, it came out at a time where you couldn't do updates necessarily on the console. So, it came out at a time where there wasn't really too much of the updating going on in the game. So, it was busted up as hell when it came out. And it was so broken, and it was so lazily designed, and the graphics were terrible. Although there were some environments that looked pretty nice. But there was so much wrong with that game. But it had very good ideas, and I think you can agree. The sandbox elements, the adventuring kind of thing. Wouldn't you agree in that part?
The concept of Dragon Ball Z Sagas, I'd give them an A in terms of what they were trying to do. I'd give them an F for effort. I mean, Josh, the way I look at it is this is what really pissed me off. I've actually played that Dragon Ball Z game a lot. I didn't realize how shitty it was until I became an adult, and I actually look back and I'm like, wow, this really is a piece of shit. And actually, I was watching Pro Jared's video a couple of years ago, and he kind of made me really think from an adult perspective on how shitty the game is. And I said to myself, okay, let's use some specifics. So, one of the things that really sucks about the game is that the game mechanics are complete shit when it pertains to the fighting system. Now, what exactly do I mean by this, Josh? Every fucking character fights the same fucking way. They didn't even have any variation on the type of punching and kicking styles. The fighting styles were cheap. It looks stiff as fuck once you punch. There's like a 2-second delay before you hit again. It was fucking ridiculous. There were some ridiculous moves, and this is, guys, we're just talking off of memory. This is how shitty the game was that we remember this stuff off the top of our heads. I remember there were some fucking moves that are insane to dodge. There were some points of the game where you just can't even hit the enemies. The glitches were off the charts. I've never played any game in my life that had as many glitches. I remember I had the game for the GameCube, and there would be some points where I'm just like falling into this white abyss. It was ridiculous. Now, they did have some destructible environments. One thing that I felt was really complete shit, Josh, and I'm sure you agree, is the limitation on flying. You can only fly as high as you fucking jump off. Who the fuck designed that shit? Like, if you can only fly high if you jump off of a really high mountain. Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Who thought about that? That you can only fly as high as you jump off? That was complete shit. The animations for charging up were insanely long. My goodness, Josh, don't you remember that?
Yeah, and also running in that game took a while to start up because it was the locomotion was a long time to start, and a good acceleration on your character. It took a very long time to start running. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
I will.
Don't even remind me.
If we're gonna give the game any sort of credit besides the fact it had good ideas, at least it did. Even though every character played exactly the same, even Broly, who's a secret character to unlock. At least
and
the game
Bardock
had,
too.
Oh, that's right.
Bardock was also
at least the game did have a pretty good amount of combos, but they were worthless. Because I think there's one that's like a completely broken. It doesn't matter if you use combos because they're all like the same, really, in terms of what damage they use. And the melee attacks in that game were seriously underpowered in general, so you really only needed to power up your key and shoot energy blasts. And I mean, the sound effects and the graphics for the energy blasts were terrible. They were very repetitive, and they seemed like the quality of them themselves were very low quality. So the only way to beat any bosses was use special attacks. You couldn't punch them to death, otherwise, you're gonna lose.
Josh, I'll just say this. I think you're being a little too nice. I think you need to intensify your profanity because you're being a little too nice on that piece of fucking shit. I mean, I think I can shit out a better game than Dragon Ball Z Sagas looking at this from an older perspective. And what's so funny is when you play games as kids, you really don't realize how shitty they are. We're not even done yet. I mean, let's talk about the AI. And Josh,
oh jeez,
I'll let you talk more about the AIs because you had a stronger opinion on how shitty the fucking AIs were on that game.
The AIs have a one-track mind, and that is to pretty much annihilate you as all their efforts are to fucking annihilate you, and that's it. They don't care about defense. They will let you punch them as much as they will allow it. They won't defend or anything. They'll just keep coming at you, and it is just a one-track mind AI system. And to kind of go upon that, there are parts of the game where there's so many enemies that take so little damage when you actually hit them that the game's broken at that point. And I don't remember if there were difficulty settings for the game, but I assume I was playing on the default one. And the game's insanely difficult for what it is. But the AI was so simplistic, it's like something you would see in a Nintendo 64 game or a PlayStation title even. They just have they have no dynamic elements to the AI. They're so terrible. And let's not even get started on the teammate AI. I think there was a mission where you had to defend Dende or something. He would always die.
You could actually hit him by accident. You remember that, Josh? I actually remember that episode. That was the episode where you need to escort Dende to go fight Frieza in his second or third form. And I remember specifically that Dende, you could actually hit him by accident. So if you Kamehameha him, he's dead. Who thought, like, it was just ridiculous. Now, one thing that really pissed me off about the AIs that I'm sure you probably remember is that there are points in the game where you cannot inflict damage on the enemy unless you're in the Super Saiyan transformation. And let's not even get started into how shitty the Super Saiyan transformation. That was the biggest piece of shit Super Saiyan system I've ever seen in my life. And I'll be honest, Dragon Ball Z Xenoverse is not perfect with the Super Saiyan system. I do think the energy drops fast. But I don't think any Super Saiyan system has ever been almost as bad except for Taiketsu when you can only use Super Saiyan to use your attacks, your energy attacks, which is retarded. But I think that who thought of that? Like, you're beating the living fucking shit out of your enemy. Like, you're hitting them with combos that you can't even imagine. And it's not even doing a ounce of damage unless you're hitting them as a Super Saiyan. Who thought about that concept? Because obviously, if you're beating the living shit out of them and you're sending them and you're knocking them away. By the way, the game did have some decent knockaway effects where you can occasionally hit your enemies into like a nearby mountain, even though most of the time it didn't do a damn thing to them. You know, it's like, who thought about that system where they look like they're getting their ass kicked, but it's not doing a single bit of damage? Until you're in a Super Saiyan, are you kidding me? And then there was this one mission I remember specifically, off the top of my head, where you would, because guys, I've played this game so many times, I memorized it like the back of my hand. There's this mission where you're fighting against Frieza, and you can't do any damage on him. You're just basically just stalling, and you're beating the living shit out of him. He can't even touch you, and yet nothing's happening to him. Are you kidding me? Who designed that? Now, to the game's credit, they did have a good cutscene. I do think the cutscene was good, even though Raditz's arm, and I'll probably post a little picture so you guys can see, Raditz's arm looked really weird in this clip. But, like, honestly, guys, like, I look at Sagas, and I say it was one of the worst games of all time. Now, Josh, do you want to talk more about the story? Because we haven't even touched that. About how fucked up the AIs were in conjunction with the story.
Well, which specific part of the story? Is the enemies they throw at you or the story itself?
The story itself.
Okay. It just left so... I mean, there have been Dragon Ball Z games that leave stuff out, but this game left so much out.
Like what?
Like, there's so many parts of the Cell Saga, if I remember correctly. Like, it's been like 6 years since I played the game. You obviously remember a lot better than I did. I played it a lot, but you seem to have, lived off it basically when you were a kid.
Oh yeah, that was the only game I played. It was one of the few GameCube games for Dragon Ball Z.
But the story, there's just, first of all, we already know the story in Dragon Ball Z. It was poorly written in the game. The dialogue was terrible, if I remember correctly. The voice acting as well. The writing, like I said, they just left a lot of important elements out. And you can look at that and say they're not important, really, because we know the story. But if you're going by the Dragon Ball Z story, you should include stuff from the actual story. What do you have to say about it?
Oh, definitely. Now, one thing I did like is like an add-on is that they did have, if I remember correctly, there was this guy called Soba, who was on Planet Yardra, and you have to fight him with Goku. I thought that was a pretty interesting fight. That was probably one of the few fucking things that they actually did that was good for the game itself. But, I could just keep going on. Like, for example, when you have to fight Cell with Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. That was insanely difficult from my memory. Number one, Gohan can't use Kamehameha until like the ending portion of the game, where you basically have to kick Cell's ass again. And basically Cell has like a small piece of life, and you just do Kamehameha to finish him off. It was dumb. And what I remember is the Super Saiyan transformation. Now let me go on to this. Ho, 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 ho. Boy, do I have something to say about the Super Saiyan transformation in that game. My goodness. Could you have written a worse way to turn Super Saiyan? Number one, the energy chugs down ridiculously fast. Don't you remember that, Josh?
Yeah, I actually do.
There's no way to really maintain it. You have to basically beat the living the only way to somewhat keep it up is to just keep punching the fucking shit out of your enemies. But, the game was ridiculously broken that it's hard to last blows them because sometimes the enemies are, like, lying on the ground. So you can't do anything to them. So your Super Saiyan transformation lasts literally, like, 30 seconds. And you can't, sometimes it's not even good. I remember in the history of Trunks story mode, and once you beat the game and you could redo the missions, I don't remember exactly how it was, but this is what you were trying to refer to earlier, Josh. The game gets insanely difficult once you play through it once. Once you try to replay it again, I think like they step up the difficulty like a ridiculous amount, especially when you're doing a co-op. I remember I would spend like 2 to 3 minutes trying to kill one robot in that history of Trunks story mode, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And like, even if you're using the strongest character, by the way, Broly is the strongest character in the game, no doubt. They made him like ridiculously broken. And it was just insane how much you have to hit him, and it's doing nothing. Broly and Super Saiyan 2 Gohan are the only characters that are good in the game. There's basically no way that you can even fight your friends except for this really, really shitty hyperbolic time chamber modes with Goku and Gohan and Trunks and Vegeta. And if you pick whichever characters you want, you can actually fight your friends in that mode. Super Saiyans are the only usable characters that are worth full because they could actually turn Super Saiyan even though it's only for 30 seconds. The rest of the characters are complete what, Josh?
Garbage.
Yes, they're complete garbage. But one thing that I remember correctly is that in that mode where you actually fight against, your friends, you can't even knock their health bars down. You have to like do combos on them to beat them. It's like, who can get your combos off first? It's insane. There really isn't. The game mechanics are so limited. Like, there's only a certain way to dodge, and I remember for the GameCube, pressing Z teleports. There's only X amount of ways that you can actually hit them without them blocking. It was such a piece of shit game. I could go all day about the stuff that we haven't even mentioned. the good things about the game are so limited. I mean, I remember for the AIs, once you beat like the Cybermen, they fucking smush. They smush. Who thought about that concept? So when you beat the enemies, they literally turn flat on the ground and smush. That is, that is just horrible. I mean, Josh, we could go all day about this, can't we?
I agree, yeah.
A couple more things. Maybe having Bardock and Broly, you know, because Bardock and Broly weren't really playable characters in many games at that point, if I remember correctly. So that was a plus.
Also, it was the first Dragon Ball Z game on Xbox, which is what I had it for, actually. And I do like the idea of being able to go back in the campaign and basically get play as any of the characters you have unlocked. You could fight Raditz as Broly, which was actually very good. And I did like the adventure mode concept. It could have been, obviously, done a lot better. But
what
I just
would you
wasn't...
honestly say was the biggest problem, though, with it?
Aside from the glitches, it's just that the game was insanely unbalanced in terms of how strong your character is, as well as everyone in the game, including the enemies and the bosses, felt exactly the same. The enemies you fight in the game and the bosses you fight, like Raditz, Nappa, all those guys, they feel exactly the same. They just have bigger health bars.
Not to mention, the only difference is some energy attacks.
Right, and they probably don't do any different damage, I would assume. No one, they're fucking lazy job on that game.
I mean, that game was really a piece of shit. I think that it's not even questionable. Worst Dragon Ball Z game of all time. Yes, you can say Taiketsu. And for those of you who don't know, Taiketsu was for the Game Boy Advance. That game was really shitty, but I gave that game a pass only because for a Game Boy Advance game, there's only so low you can go because the game system in itself is limited in what it can do. But, I mean, Taiketsu was a piece of shit.
For the record, I do think Taiketsu was much worse.
To say much worse is being very, very
that game was such trash.
Well, do you want to quickly mention this? I mean, because we've already done most of our ranting. Might as well finish it off with a little rant on Taiketsu if you want. I'll let you get into your profane mode.
Oh, alright. Taiketsu had the fucking most disgusting visual presentation I've seen in a game. It's like, if I remember correctly, it's like claymation looking almost. What was it to you? What did you think it looked like? It was terrible looking.
Yeah, the graphics were awful.
They didn't even try. Well, you say even for a Game Boy Advance, Super Sonic Warriors is on the Game Boy Advance. That game's fantastic.
I love Super Sonic Warriors. Both 1 and 2.
There have been many, many fantastic games on the Game Boy Advance. There's no reason they couldn't have made Taiketsu better. I didn't even play it long enough to use Super Saiyan, apparently. Like, you were talking about Super Saiyan. I must have gotten rid of that fucking game after that. That game had some of the worst combat mechanics as well. There isn't much to say about that game because I had limited time with it, but I know from the couple hours I had with it that it was much worse than Sagas. Sagas is somewhat bearable for me. It's terrible, but I had a small enjoyment when I was a kid. I haven't played it in recent years, and I hope to God anyone watching this doesn't expect Sagas gameplay in this video, because I don't think you or me are gonna record gameplay for that shit game. I'd have to emulate it, and I would never touch that. Yeah, I'm gonna have Xenoverse on, but yeah, that's all I can say about Taiketsu. I don't want to rant about it too long because this video's getting long enough, man.
Yeah, honestly, the only thing I'll say about Taiketsu is, I mean, they did have, if I remember correctly, I do think Broly was in the game. I don't remember. I think Broly was in the game. I think that was one plus that it had.
He must have looked awful in that game.
What I remember correctly is that, you remember, back in the day, remember, Broly was such a rare character to have in video games that whenever Broly was in a game, people would go, like, ape shit over it. So, like, that's one thing that I remember.
Yeah, I don't think he was in a game until Budokai 3, if I remember, but I don't know for sure.
So that's one thing that when the heck it's just like, oh yeah, we got Broly. Everybody's like, yeah, let's play with Broly. And Josh would probably say, what is he?
Garbage.
Nah, Broly was trash. The whole game was
garbage.
What I remember about Taiketsu, though, to close this out, is that the game was so horrible in terms of the fighting mechanics because the punches felt slow as fuck unless you're playing with Gotenks. Gotenks was the only character whose punches and kicks felt fast. Everybody else moves like a fucking turtle. Oh, I think Frieza was kind of fast, too. Like, only the small characters. Like, all the mid-sized and large characters, their punches and kicks were ridiculously fucking slow. It was dumb as hell how when when you're playing with Majin Buu, I remember this correctly. Like how, like I said, that whenever you only transform into like a Super Saiyan or something when you're doing like energy attacks, Majin Buu would turn into Super Buu just to do the energy attacks. Who thought about this?
Oh, what? That happened to the game? Oh, that definitely is worse than Sagas. Come on, that's terrible.
But honestly, man, I only give it a pass only because it was for Game Boy Advance. But at the end of the day, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed our rant. I mean, we've talked for over 20 minutes on how much we hate this. I hope you guys enjoyed because, guys, I've never really made a rant video except for that one video I kind of made apologizing to 92 Movie Fan, and that really wasn't a rant when you think about it. It was just more of a heated opinion. So honestly, guys, I hope you enjoyed my first rant. We think these are the worst Dragon Ball Z games of all time. The only reason they sold copies was because they had the name Dragon Ball Z. And for kids who actually picked up the game, we probably thought it was fun. But as we look at this with an older perspective looking down, my God, were those games horrible. And for my younger viewers out there like Ronnie, who probably was way too young to even experience this game. As a matter of fact, now I think about it, this game is probably older than Ronnie itself.
2005 it came out.
Let's see, and I think Ronnie's 11. So yeah, Ronnie would have been like an infant when this game was around. So, I mean, honestly, man, that game is such a piece of shit. Ronnie, just look it up, and if you're watching this, and all the rest of you kids who are watching this, you never have to hear about these games or ever play about them because us older guys play them so that you guys don't fucking have to, okay? Worst pieces of shit on fucking earth. Fuck you, Sagas. Fuck you, Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu. You embarrassed us, Dragon Ball Z fans. And whoever designed those fucking games needs to be fired for the rest of their life. They should never ever get a job designing video games again. I don't understand I don't understand how those games were created. And that's all I have to say. Josh, do you have any final comments on how you thought about the games?
I have said everything I can right now.
What word describes them?
Fucking garbage.
Anyways. So I hope you guys enjoyed our rants. All profanity, unholding back. You got Qaaman at his realist and Josh at his realist. We hope you guys enjoyed. And most importantly, over everything else, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. By the way, Sagas is a piece of shit.